Alrighty. So we've been working on Rome for a couple of days, and we're going to keep going on that. Did the assignment happen to post yet in Google Classroom? It did? Awesome. Cool. So right over in Google Classroom, I think it's called The Rules of Rome. Something like that? The Rules of the Roman Empire. All right. So if you are over in Google Classroom, scroll down to Social Studies. Rules of the Roman Empire is our new assignment. Let's go ahead and get those open. So we have a PDF with the rules as well as a place to type on a Google Doc. So have the Google document open. There's 10 of them? That seems like a lot. Okay, so there are 6 rules, but 10 questions. So you want to make sure that you're following along. It does not specifically say what question goes with what rule. And I'll help you guys figure those parts out, but your answers are going to be up to you. So this will be one of the graded assignments. I will help you guys determine which rule you need to look at so that you know where to look. But the questions and answers I'm going to leave up to you. So basically, we're going to read through it, and then we'll go through and figure out which rules apply to which question, and then I'm going to let you guys work to finish out this worksheet. Does this make sense? A little bit. We're going to read the information first, and then determine which rule, so this is rule number 1, goes with which questions. Because it doesn't say which questions are with which rules. You have to figure that out. There should be 2 of the same rules for a few because there's 6 rules and 10 questions. So you're going to end up doubling on a few of the rules, which is fine. But like I said, we're going to figure out which numbers go to which rules, and then you guys can answer the questions from there. But we're going to start with reading through it. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit on this. And we're going to read through rule number 1 first. And I will help you decide which rules go with what. And we'll go from there. Do you guys need a second to get this pulled up, or are we ready? Okay, I'm going to take that as a we're ready. So, okay, again, make sure that you are on the Google Meet or on the thing. And here we go. Rule number 1 says, the Roman army was made up of citizens from both patrician and plebeian classes. Now, before we continue, let's review that really quick. The patricians, were they wealthy or not wealthy? They were wealthy. They were the top 5% of Rome. They basically ruled everything without having to do anything. There's not very many of them, but they somehow were able to control everything. So that means, what were the plebeians? 95% what?
So that's why most of the people were the patricians.
Good. Most of the people were poor, right? The plebeians. So we have the 2 classes, the patricians that were wealthy and the plebeians that were poor. But both of them made up the army. And then it says, the infantry ranks were usually filled with the low-class plebeians since they made up the vast majority of the population. The infantry is the part of the military that serves on foot. So those are the people that will go out to war, right? And walk. Patricians often served in the cavalry, which was on horseback, since they could afford their own horses. Consuls took the commanding position, and they were often appointed generals to lead smaller divisions. Who can remind me what a consul was? Yes. So yes, consuls were one of the 2 leaders. So there's 2 leaders called the consuls. One of them would go serve in the military, and one stayed home, right, to make sure that the city was safe. All right. Then we have the Roman army was organized into legions. These were large groups of 3,000 to 6,000 men and were often protected from the sides and the rear by the cavalry. So you have these group of men in the center. 3 to 6,000 of them, with the people on horseback on the outside. Okay?
So that's the patricians?
Usually the patricians were on the outside, yes, and the plebeians on the inside. Yeah, good. The legions were further broken down into centuries, or groups of 100 men. The leader of a century was called a centurion. Centuries would travel together with their legion, but they could act independently of their legion during a battle or in times of crisis. So there's some information about war. We're going to go back over, and let's read through the questions and see if any of them apply to the ones about war. So number 1 says, what government position managed games and entertainment for people? Did we just read about that at all?
No.
Nope. Number 2, how were legions and centuries similar? How were they different? Did we read about that? Yep. So you can write rule number 1 next to that, and I'm going to highlight it so that you guys can see that. I will zoom in as well. So rule number 1 is for number 2. They're not in order, Yoshi. I said that like 5 times.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. They're not in order, so I'm going to help you guys figure out which rules go to which ones, and then you will be answering the questions at the end. We don't know yet. We haven't read it yet. We're going to read rule number 1, apply it to the questions, and then we'll read rule number 2 and figure out which ones go to number 2. That means answer. A for answer. Okay. What about number 3? What powers did the Roman assembly have? Was that in rule number 1? Did they talk about that?
Yeah. No.
No, not really. Okay. Did they talk about how the citizenship varied in the Roman Republic?
No.
Nope. So not number 4. Number 5. What is the difference between the infantry and the cavalry? Did they talk about that? Yeah, they did. We talked about it right then. So that's part of rule number 1. I'm going to highlight that again. So number 5 will go to rule number 1. You'll find an answer there. Yes. Huh? Yeah, we put number 2 is for rule number 1, yeah. Number 5 also applies to the first one. Number 6, during times of crisis, how long were the dictators allowed to rule? Was that in there? I don't remember seeing that anywhere.
I don't either.
Number 7, what government position served as a treasurer? So the person that took care of the money. Did they talk about that?
Yeah.
Not yet. Number 8, describe the rights of women and children in ancient Rome. Did they talk about that yet?
Yeah.
Not yet. Number 9, how was slavery different in Rome than elsewhere around the world later in history? Not yet, nope. And number 10, what rules were placed on the consuls? Did they talk about that?
Yeah, they talked about consoles like.
They did talk about consuls, but I'm not 100% certain that they've talked about all of the rules on the consuls. So we're going to leave that one blank for now. So far you should have that number 5 applies to rule number 1 that we just read, and number 2 applies to it. Those overarching questions at the end are just ones that you're going to answer at the very end after we've read everything. So yes, you can use all of them to answer these questions. But you'll do those overarching questions, number 1 and 2, at the very end when you're done. Okay? Let's go ahead and read rule number 2. Yep, only 2 of them apply to rule number 1. Yoshi, I will take your markers away. Leave them in your desk for now. Thank you. Rule number 2. This is these are like the common rules of the Roman Empire, right? Rule number 2 says, the Roman Republic was based around the relationship between the Senate, the 2 consuls, and the assembly. In some ways, the consuls acted like kings, however, their power was severely limited. For example, the Senate could veto or reject a decision that the consuls made. Similarly, consuls could reject the ideas of the other consul. Also, consuls only served a 1-year term and could not be elected again for 10 years. In times of crisis, though, a consul could be given complete control, or a dictator, for a period of 6 months. The Senate was made up of 300 men who, in Rome's early history, were chosen by only the high-class patrician elite. After the conflict of the orders, remember that was when the plebeians were like, no, we want power too. So after the conflict of the orders, plebeians played a powerful role of determining the affairs of the state. The Senate served as judges, reviewed the laws, and directed the day-to-day affairs of the nation. A third group, called the Assembly, also developed to represent the common people of Rome. While initially their power was little, the Assembly eventually created laws and obtained the sole power to choose the consuls of Rome. So, a lot of information there. Let's go decide which questions you're going to use this information for. Let's look at number 1. Number 1 says, what government position managed games and entertainment for people? No, it didn't really say anything about that. Number 2, we already know goes for rule number 1, so we don't need to do that one. Good. Number 3, what powers did the Roman Assembly have? Did we just read about that? Yeah, the rules that they had. So this goes with rule number 2. Okay. All right, our next one, number 4. How did the citizenship vary in the Roman Republic? Did we talk about that? Not really. Not yet. We already did number 5. That's for rule number 1. Number 6. During the times of crisis, how long were dictators allowed to rule? Did we talk about that? Yeah, that one was in there. That one is going to go with rule number 2. All right. If it did, hit the undo button. All right. Number 6 is rule number 2. What did you delete? Well, just retype it if you can. It is a document that you can type into. Okay. Number 7 says, what government position served as a treasurer? Did we talk about that? Not yet. Nope. Number 8, describe the rights of the women and children in ancient Rome. Not yet. Nope. Number 9, how was slavery different in Rome than elsewhere around the world? Nope. Number 10, what rules were placed on the consuls? We did talk about some rules for the consuls, so let's say that this is number 2, but I bet you can read through most of these and find different rules in each of them, or rules for the consul. I don't know about all of them, but I mean, there was some information in number 1 about the role of the consul. There's some information in rule number 2 about it. So you might be able to do a few answers for number 10. But for now, we'll just stick with number 2 because there's a lot of it in number 2. Okay. So number 10. So number 10 was rule number 2. Then number 7 is not. No. But number 6 is. Number 6 goes with rule number 2. And number 3 goes with rule number 2. Okay. I'm going to go back through these at the end, so if you missed one, it's okay. We'll get to them. Let's go ahead and go read rule number 3. And 10. 3, 6, and 10, yeah. All right, rule number 3, more information, says, the citizenship varied quite widely during the Roman Republic. Shortly after the Romans overthrew Tarquin the Great, the last Etruscan monarch, the Romans created a republic that gave power to Roman males. All males, so boys, over 15 who were descendants from the original tribes of Rome became citizens. These males wore togas as a way to distinguish themselves from other Romans. Eventually, all citizenship expanded, and all citizens wore white togas. You guys have seen a toga, right?
No.
What?
Just in
Roman toga.
Peabody Sherman. Oh, yeah.
This is like what a Roman toga would look like. Yeah, it's like, I don't know, like that. Not necessarily a skirt. I mean, yeah, it's just how they wore, what they wore. Yeah. Anyway, then it says citizenship throughout Rome varied greatly. The full citizen could hold public office, vote on key issues, marry freeborn people, and practice business. Some citizens were not allowed to vote or hold public office, but could still practice business. A third type of citizen could vote and practice business, but could not hold office or marry a freeborn person. The Romans had a very unique approach to how they handled the people they conquered. Instead of ruling these people as conquered subjects, the Romans invited them to become citizens. Rather than continuing to fight Rome, these people slowly became integrated into the Roman society. So, rule number 3 talks about the citizens of Rome, different types of citizenship. So let's go ahead and look over at our stuff. Let's start with number 1. Freeborn means that you're not a slave. You're born free. You're not born into slavery. Number 1 says, what government position managed games and entertainment for the people? Did we talk about that one? Nope. We already know that number 2 is taken, so is number 3. What about number 4? How did citizenship vary in the Roman Republic? Good. That goes with rule number 3. Good, good, good. Okay, so number 4 goes with rule number 3. Sorry if all the numbers are confusing, but I think you guys are understanding what we're coming from, right? Well, if you look at rule number 3, you're going to find the answer to the question number 4 in those paragraphs. Okay, number 5 we already have. 6 we already have. Did we talk about what government position served as a treasurer?
No.
Nope, not yet. Good. Number 8, did we describe the rights of women and children in ancient Rome?
No.
Not yet. Number 9, how is slavery different in Rome than elsewhere?
Yeah.
Did we talk about it?
No. Sort of.
Sort of, not completely. Let's hold off on that one because there might be more later on. I'm not sure. So only 1 for that one. What number?
4.
Number 4. So this one. This is the one that we did. Number 4 applies to rule number 3. So if you are looking for the answer to the question number 4, look on the page that says rule number 3. No, you do not need to be filling out the answers just yet. We're reading through it. I'm telling you where to look, and then I'm going to give you guys the time to go fill out the answers. If you are filling them out, totally fine. But our next one, rule number 4. I'm going to read through that one. This one talks about different government positions. It says, many government positions existed within the Roman Republic to ensure that the government ran smoothly. For example, while senators served as judges on large matters, within local communities and regions, that responsibility would fall to the praetors. I don't know what a praetor is. That's okay. An entire department was devoted to the administration of public games. Much like a modern-day Parks and Recreation Department, aediles, an interesting word, ensured the population was entertained. Initially, aediles were in charge of organizing public festivals and games to ensure that people were enjoying themselves. Over time, the position grew to monitor the quality of public markets and even to ensure that the city had a large enough grain supply to ward off a disaster, because everybody needs grains to ward off disasters. And then finally, quaestors served in many different roles under the Roman Republic. At first, the position was created to monitor the treasury, which is their money. They ensured that Rome had an adequate gold supply and that taxation was being followed. Eventually, the position turned into a type of detective that investigated murders in the empire. So, let's go apply rule number 4 to some of these questions. Number 1 says, what government position managed games and entertainment for the people? Did we talk about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we did. Rule number 4. That one goes with rule number 4. Okay. Okay, so number 1, you're going to need to look in the paragraphs of rule number 4 to find your answer. We did number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Number 7 says, what government position served as a treasurer? Did we find that one? Yeah, we did. That one was in there. That rule is on the next page. So answer goes on that page. Rule is on the next page. So rule number 4. Yeah, for number 7. Good thing they're not. Okay, so number 7 is for rule number 4. Number 8, describe the rights of women and children. Did we talk about that?
Yeah.
Not yet. And number 9, how was slavery different in Rome? Did we talk about that yet?
No.
Not completely. So on this one, you should have put that you need to look in rule number 4 for number 7 and number 1. So 7 and 1. Okay. 7 and 1. Let's go read rule number 5. This one is about slaves. It says, slaves were bought and sold at markets everywhere throughout the Republic. Unlike recent history, though, slavery in Rome was not a racial matter. Slaves in Rome were mostly criminals or foreigners who had lost a war. Wow, that's a different word. Manumission, to be released from slavery, so that's what that word means, that you're released from slavery, was very common in Rome after a slave had served his or her punishment. In hard times, it was not uncommon for a father to sell his children into slavery to pay for a debt. So that's yeah, that is kind of scary, but that's also very different from recent history, right? In recent history, if you were a slave, were you ever able to get out of slavery? No, not at all. So, and it's slavery in recent times, when you think about it in the 1800s and stuff, was based on the color of your skin. If you were not white, you could have been very easily put into slavery, right? Or you're hiding so that you don't become a slave. But in ancient Rome, did it matter what color your skin was? No. If you owed something to someone, or you lost a war, or you were a criminal, you could become a slave. Or you're in debt to someone, yeah. Yes.
We're reading something about the colors of the skins a long time ago,
Mm-hmm.
and they had a date for like other colors. I thought they were talking like about purple or orange.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, our last paragraph here says there were virtually no laws that protected how slaves were treated. If slaves disobeyed their masters, they could be whipped, branded with a hot iron, or even killed. Oftentimes, punishment would happen in public to serve as example to other slaves who thought about disobeying. However, since slaves were expensive, owners did not do this often. So instead of killing their slaves, they would brand them, whip them, but they didn't do it very often because they didn't want to have to buy more slaves, which is sad. Let's go apply those paragraphs to a question. It doesn't go to 1, not 2, not 3, 4. Okay, so there could be children's slaves, yes.
No, I mean like ones that their father gave to the slave.
Then they're children's slaves.
Yeah, they're little money. Get money.
Yeah, so like if I had a child and I needed money to pay for something, I could sell my child into slavery and get that money instead.
But would they like be able to get out?
Potentially, eventually, yeah.
What they didn't do anything.
Huh?
They didn't do anything.
They were sold into slavery. Just because they didn't do it doesn't mean that they got to get out of it that easy. Their parents did it. So, for number 8, does it talk about the rights of women and children?
Yes.
Does it?
No.
Not yet. But how about slavery, this part? Yeah. This is rule number 5. Yeah, but we're still going to read it. Number 9 applies to rule number 5. Number 10 is rule number 2, yes. Huh? Only number 9 is number 5, yes. Okay. So just number 9, you should have rule number 5 on that one. And then I'm going to go read our last one, rule number 6. This one talks about the rights of women and children. What a surprise. It says, Rome society gave few, if any, rights to women. The father was legally the head of the household and had complete authority over his wife and children. Roman law reinforced this. So, for example, Roman law regarded that the wife was the property of her husband and completely subjected to his will, which means that he basically owns her and gets to whatever he needs, she will do, basically.
Like
Cook, clean, take care of the kids, all of that stuff. So Roman law also supported that a wife being punished in any way that the husband deemed appropriate. So, for example, he could have her killed or sold as a slave if he felt like it. The right to own property was also strictly prohibited by women. Anything that she owned instantly became her husband's property upon their marriage. So, if I owned a bread maker, I don't know, I'm thinking of something ancient, I don't know. If I owned a pot as a woman, right, and I married someone, immediately that pot would become my husband's, right? So any property that I owned would suddenly become my husband's because I have no rights. And then it says children had few rights as well. A father could sell off his child to pay off a debt. If a child did something that disrespected his family, the child could be removed from the household at any age. Also, if a child was born with a deformity or was determined to be weak at birth, Roman law supported their execution if the father asked for it. So basically, if a child was born with any sort of deformity, like maybe they had a missing arm or something like that, they could just be executed as a baby, no chance to live. If the people like looked at the baby and maybe the baby was born sick, it had some sort of disease, if they didn't want to raise it, they could have it executed instead. Yes. Kind of like what Sparta would do with their babies, yes. Yep. So, this one obviously applies to the last one we have left. Number 8 goes with rule number 6. Okay? So number 8 goes with rule number 6. I don't know. I gotta look up. Yeah, so let's go through these and make sure you have the correct rule, and let me explain the rest of what you need to do here. I'm sure some of you guys have already started it. The only thing that I would like you to make sure you do is that when you write the answers, you write them in a complete sentence. So, this first one, what government position managed games and entertainment for the people? You'll go find that answer and say, the government position was blank. No, I'm not going to say it for you. Okay, so you need to fill it out. Okay? So, essentially, go back to whatever rule we have highlighted. Go back to those paragraphs, read through, and find your answers. If you remember it, awesome, write the answers. Yeah. Okay, so the bottom. So let's go through this. Number 1, remember, is rule number 4. So make sure you have that. Number 2 is from rule number 1. Question 3 applies to rule number 2. Question 4 applies to rule number 3. Just make sure you have the correct ones at this point. Question 5, go back to rule number 1 to look for it. Question 6, you're going to need to look at rule number 2. Question 7 goes with rule number 4. Question 8 with number 6. Question number 9 goes with rule number 5. And question number 10 goes with rule number 2. And then there are, is it 2 questions? 2 questions that are overarching. On these ones, you can use any of the information to answer it.
Especially in the passages or in like
Use the passages. So use the passage to answer these questions. So yeah, so use the information about the Roman government for this first one and compare it to our government. So what you know about our government, compare it to the Roman government. I'm going to highlight this. No. In our government, we have the president, and then we have 3 branches of government: the legislative, the executive, and the judicial branch of government. You learn more about those, I think, in like 7th or 8th grade social studies. But we have a Senate, we have the House of Representatives, which is like their assembly. So, anyway, you need to use any of the information or your own information if you need to answer the 2 questions. So, how's our government similar, and how is our government different from ancient Rome's government? Yeah, you guys can go ahead and get started. We have about 25 minutes of class left. I would like you guys to stay on, if you're online, until you finish this, please, so that if you have any questions, you can ask me those questions.